Okay, in this little segment, I'm gonna show you guys how to download and install the virtual machine for the course. So basically just open the link that I posted here and should bring up a download link and click download. We get this warning that it can't scan this file for viruses, and click download, download anyway. And then while that's downloading here, we can install VirtualBox if we don't already have it. And so I'm using the latest version here, 6.1.18. Then you can pick your package based on what you're running. So if Windows is what I'm showing you on this now, you can just click save file, run the Windows installer, and then you'll have VirtualBox installed. If you don't want to use VirtualBox, VMware is also an option. I found the VMware Workstation 16. It's free for non-commercial use, which this is because we're teaching an open source course. And so you can download VMware Workstation player. That's the right tool to use. So you can click through this and then download that as well. For Windows. Save that. All right, so once those downloads are done, I'll be back. Okay, now my downloads are done. So if I look at my downloads folder, I got this OVA file, which is the virtual machine. I got VirtualBox or VMware Player. You don't need both, just pick whichever one you want. I've been using VirtualBox, so I think that's my first preference. But if you have any trouble with that, I suggest trying VMware Player instead. So now that we've got those installed, I can open up VirtualBox and should look something like this. And from VirtualBox, we can go to import. Click import the local file system, browse for our file in downloads. This is the OVA that we want to open. Click next. And these default settings should all be fine. We can always change them later within the machine settings anyway. So click import. And that'll take a little bit of time. And while that's importing, I should mention that if you have the RAM or the CPU capability on your computer, I definitely suggest increasing those values. If you got more than 4 cores, you can increase that. If you have enough RAM that you can leave some for the host operating system and increase that can also be helpful. And this will allow us to run more vehicles, potentially run them at a higher warp rate if desired. So while that's downloading, or while that's importing, we can also install Google Earth and OpenCPN. So while both of these are installed in the VM, your performance will often be better if you run the 3D GUIs outside of the virtual machine on the host. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do. So you scroll to Google Earth and then scroll down to where it says download Google Earth Pro on desktop. And then you'll get this window and you can accept the terms and download it. And click the save the file and install that. The other possible tool, and this is up to you, is the OpenCPN chart plotter. You can also download that for any of the systems. If I click start and download here in the Windows, download, I can download it for Windows here. Download this as well. Okay, so we'll let those download. And now that our VM's imported here, before I started, let's check out the settings a little bit. So, you know, there's basic stuff here that shouldn't need to change. Linux 64-bit, that should all be fine. The system here, here's where you can increase the memory. I have 64 gigs on this machine, so you know, I can happily increase this to at least say 16 or 32 gigs. I set the processors. I have 8 cores, so I could set this up to 8 cores. And I would recommend, you know, set the number of cores to the number of CPUs you actually have on your real machine. And the RAM, just make sure you leave enough for the host OS. And this green bars should be a fairly safe area to work in. And then you may not need to change anything in the displays, but you could increase the video memory if you've got extra video memory available. It can't hurt. Should all be good. Now to networking. So this virtual machine, there's 2 network adapters. There's one that's connected via NAT, which will be for the internet. So it sets up a NAT network between the virtual machine and your host computer, much in the same way a home router connects your internal network through the internet. And then the second adapter, there's a host-only adapter, and this will allow us to directly connect to the virtual machine from the host computer on the address 192.168.56.10. So leave those 2 in there, and that should be good. And I think that's all we should need to do in here. If you do get an error about USB 2, just make sure that you also installed the VirtualBox's extensions package. So if we go back to the VirtualBox website, there's an extension pack here, all supported platforms. Just click this, download it, and install it, and you'll get the USB will work correctly. All right, so now that that's all set, we can launch this VM. Just double click that. That should start up over here. Take a little bit to boot up. So I should mention, if you end up deciding to use VMware, you may need to change some of the settings in there. I think everything worked pretty much out of the box when I tested it, but if you do run into trouble, just let me know on Slack, and I'll see if I can help you through it. All right, so now this machine's booted. So we've got a sort of basic Ubuntu 2004 desktop. Along here, we got a web browser. I'd open that up. This is how we're going to access the Jove profile page for changing the Google Earth settings. And then once we have it running, we can access Goby Liaison and the various vehicles through these tabs. So put that aside for now. A couple different options for terminals. I use the Terminator one. You can use sort of the regular terminal if you want, or you can use this Terminator terminal. And so then once checked out here, we've got Goby3, which is just a branch of Goby3 for the course, which is essentially the same as the 3.0 version. I just wanted to be able to push changes if necessary. So this has already been all built. You shouldn't need to do anything here. If I rerun it, it'll just rebuild at today's date, which you can do, but isn't necessary. Then the other thing is the Goby3 course repository, which is the master branch of the GitHub remote. And so this is where you're going to do all your work this week in this course. And so inside of this, we've got source code. We'll take a look more at this tomorrow, where all the applications exist and where all the libraries for this course, and we'll be building this up through the course of the lectures and the homework for the rest of the week. There's a little build.sh script that you can run once Goby's done building. That'll build this, or rerun it every time you want to rebuild. And there's no magic to this. It's just run cmake, and then cmake with build, which by default runs make. Any flags you want to configure for cmake or make, you can put in environmental variables, which I've done in the bash RC already. So there's some CMake flags I want to run with Clang. For Goby, I'm building release with debug info, a little bit optimized. And then for this course repo, I'm building with debug, which is the -G debug symbols in case you run into trouble and you want to debug it in the debugger, you can. And then just setting the correct path so that we have the binaries and scripts we want to use on the path. So that should already all be set up for you inside of there. So the other things we have is VS Code if you want to use that, like I'm doing in the course for developing your software, you're by all means welcome to. If you prefer to use another IDE or Emacs is installed. VI is installed. You know, whatever you feel like using, by all means. So now that that's done building, we can rebuild this, which the only change really is the date. So when you do the Goby3 version, it says this version, which is just the get hash, was released on this date, and that's when I built it. So that's what's changing. And then the other things in here, we got OpenCPN and Google Earth. So you can run them either inside of the VM, which generally works okay, though I found sometimes that, especially with Google Earth, the quality and speed isn't as good as I would like, depending on how well the virtualization of the video card does. You can see it's a little choppy there, kind of chews up a good bit of CPU. So we can run those inside the VM, or we can run them outside the VM. And I'll show you how to run them outside the VM here in a moment. Okay, so we've got Google Earth installed. We've got our projects rebuilt here. And in the start of every day, I'll push any changes that I made during the lecture to a new branch. So the instructions will have you do a git fetch, and then there'll be new branches here that you can do git checkout. It'll be like post lecture 2 or something like that. So then you can have the code as I did it in the course. And then at the end of every day's homework, like late at night, I'll probably just push my solutions. So you can check those out as well if you want to look at those. And that'll end up being like git checkout post homework 2 or post homework 3 and so on and so forth. So you can have my solutions to reference or build off of for your future problem sets if you wish. All right, so then let's go into the alpha example here and kick this off. So we'll just run topside, and we'll run the vehicle usv.launch, and then this little mission pops up just in pmarine viewer, which is, as I said in that lecture, kind of the cheater view, where you can see what's going on the vehicle, like you're inside the vehicles rather than through the SWIL link, the acoustic and satellite comms links. So like from here, I can deploy this, and I can make sure that my vehicle runs around okay. And then if I open Google Earth, and this should load up. So what I usually like to do is, you can click either the vehicle name, double click that, or the op region or op grid, and that'll automatically zoom your view to wherever that is. So that can be a nice way to quickly zoom in and see where you're operating. And then for whatever reason, it likes to tilt the view, so you can hit R on the keyboard for reset to reset your view to be top up. It's also here, reset, tilt, and compass if you don't like to use the keyboard. So so then you can see my vehicle, and if I deploy it again over here by clicking deploy, it'll run around again. So in the other viewer, we have accessible, and you don't really need to use both. You kind of use what you like. You could use both. I've been mostly using Google Earth for this course development, but OpenCPN is really nice for some operational scenarios. So I've already loaded the charts into here for Hawaii, where the trail example is, and also for Massachusetts, where my example is. So you can open the target list, the AS targets, and you can see our vehicles on here. If I click center view, it'll jump me to where where my Alpha USV actually is, which is here in Buzzards Bay in Massachusetts, close to where I am. So, so if I go back here and click deploy again, you can see this vehicle will run around OpenCPN. And if you right click on the target here, you can click the AS target list. You can toggle on and off tracks. So if I do toggle track, then it'll show me the track of the vehicle, the little purple line where it's been. And I can also you can hide all tracks. You can show all tracks. It's just kind of handy. The other thing to note is limit range, which is how far away it'll show you AS targets. I set this really high because we don't really have an own ship. So this is the distance from the own ship that you're operating off of that it'll show AS targets. So if you set this is really high, it'll show all the AS targets regardless of where they are in the world, which is useful for what we're doing here, simulating. In a real world, you might want to shrink this down. Okay, so now that that's done over here, I'm going to show you how to do the same thing outside the VM, because it can be really handy to I think Google Earth runs a lot smoother outside the virtual machine, especially. So if we look at the IP addresses, you'll see that I have loop back. I've got, this is my network, my network address translation link, which is to the internet. It's just this local IP address. You don't really need to worry about that one. But the second one is a host-only adapter. So this gives me a link to my host machine as if the virtual machine and the host were plugged in with an Ethernet cable directly. And so the host is 192.168.56.1 by default. And so unless you've changed your VirtualBox settings, this will be the host that you're pinging right now. And if I go onto the host side, open up a command line on the host, I can ping the VM as well, which is at 56.10. And that's just configured up here and under this network settings, wired settings. And I look at the settings here. I've set my IPv4 settings to manually be 56.10. So if you want to change that, you can change it from in here. A note for anyone using VMware, it seems to default to 192.168.100. Some DHCP assigned address, and these Ethernet names change. So you'll just need to go into the second one, the one that's the host only adapter, click this gear, and then change this to something on the default network for VMware, which is like, as I said, like 100, 100.10 or something like that, or change the defaults in VMware to be 56. Okay, so now that I can ping this outside, I'm going to open up the Google Earth viewer. So there's the Google Earth Ocean Interface, or Jove, has two components. There's the Google Earth side, and there's the web browser side. So if I open up to any server running Google Earth, which in this case is our VM / Jove, I get this web page. And within here, there's a bunch of stuff you can do. But really, the only thing that we're going to focus on is this profile manager page. And so within here, you can change profiles, like what kind of vehicles you want to see, what computers running Google Earth can see them, whether you're running a simulation or real data, whether you want to show the vehicle image, the colors, the length of the trails, all kinds of stuff. And so I've already got this one configured, this alpha profile for the alpha mission, which is the one we're running first. And I set this datum to be correct for the position of the, just bring this over here and then open up Google Earth again inside the VM. So I can just show you what this looks like inside of there. So this op grid, these parameters set this latitude and longitude datum set what 0, here is. And then this grid is just a XY set of points separated by colons that determines the extent of this little grid that's shown. So that's all that does. But it's convenient visually. Okay, so then if I want to look at this, let me relaunch this mission here. So if I want to see this outside the VM, there's a couple things I need to do. One is I need to open Google Earth outside the VM, inside in my host. So assuming I've installed that, and you open it up, it's going to look something like this. You'll have kind of a blank places thing. If you already have stuff here, there'll be some things, but kind of like this. So we need to do two things. One is to download this KML file that will be used by Google Earth to pull from the other side of the server. So if I download this, I click, save this file, save it somewhere locally to my downloads folder. Then within Google Earth, I can open it, go to File, Open, and find that one I downloaded. And then it'll open here to my temporary places. And it's useful a lot of the time to have this saved. So there's a bug in Google Earth. If I click Save to My Places, it'll crash. So what I want to do is just uncheck this so that it stops refreshing, and then click Save to My Places, which will now save it here. So next time I open it, I don't have to file open it. And then I can re-click this checkbox and everything comes back up. This bug's been around for ages. Then it'll be nice and stored for you here. So if you close Google Earth and reopen it, it'll be back here. So the second thing that I need to do, which I've already done for you for this default address, is to so-called bind the profile to the machine running Google Earth. And so this says, I want to see this profile, alpha, when I connect from 192.168.56.1, which is, if you remember, that's the host machine here. And we also have a binding for localhost, and that's when you're running Google Earth inside the VM. So in this case, we'll see the alpha mission because we click bind. If you don't have this binding here, like if it looks like this, you'll get an error that says there's no profile active for this IP address. And so you'll just need to go into one of the profiles and click bind to this machine's IP address, click apply, and then it'll show you the profile that you've clicked. So if I go into the VM again here and deploy my vehicle, you'll see it run around in the Google Earth instance running in my host. So keep in mind, this is Windows. This is the Windows version of Google Earth. This is the Windows version of Firefox. And this I think runs a bit smoother than running Google Earth inside of your VM. Like scrolling is smoother. The CPU loads a little less because it has access to the direct video resources of my host rather than having virtualized video cards. All right, so then let's stop this mission and switch to the alpha mission. So I switch to the trail mission, which is the second mission. So this trail mission here has 3 vehicle classes. We have a topside, which represents either a ship or a shore-based station. We have an unmanned surface vehicle, USV, and we have up to 10 AUVs. And they're all launched by this AUV.launch. And so there's this master script, all that launches all of these scripts within it. So it's like a layer above the launch script. So if I look at like the topside.launch, this launches a Goby3 and some other Goby processes directly. And if I look at like the USV, it launches Goby3 and front seat interface and manager code and stuff. And we'll look more into what this does tomorrow. But I want to give you a quick overview here and then all the Moose stuff. And similarly for the AUV, some Moose code for Moose IVP missions, and then some Goby stuff for the Goby side of things. And then if you look at this all.launch, which is sort of a meta rapid script, this launches Goby launch itself. So you're essentially using Goby launch to launch Goby launch a bunch of times. And so in this case, this is saying launch to topside, launch to USV with 4 AUVs in its comm cycle, and then launch AUV 0, 1, 2, and 3 individually here. The last thing I have is this great little generate script, which you don't need to look at the implementation. But if I run it with -help, it tells me I run generate this, the number of AUVs I want to generate, and the warp speed. So we're going to run these simulations at faster than real time typically, and that's set by this parameter in config common sim.py. This is currently 5. It's something I like to change a lot potentially. So I just have this generate all launch script. If I set it as like 4 and 10, this will regenerate with 4 AUVs and set the warp to 10. So now if I look at that sim.py, the warp is 10. So it's just it's a shorthand convenience to setting the simulation warp speed to 10 times real speed, as well as the number of vehicles. So if I wanted to launch, I don't know, 10 vehicles at 10 times warp, whoops, generate AUV launch at 10 times warp. This will update the all.launch so that it now has 10 vehicles. I would suggest starting with the default 4 vehicles at 5 warp. In your VM, if you have more cores than 4, like if you have 8 cores or 16 cores or whatever, you can up the number of vehicles proportionately. You can also probably try warp 10 even with the 4 cores if everything seems like it's working fine. It's just a balancing of CPU load. Because if you get the CPU load, the load factor too high, weird stuff will happen as processes try to compete for resources. And so we'll start with the 4 AUVs at warp 5, which is the default. So that's the same as running this. And then my all.launch has got top side and 4 AUVs and 1 USV. So let me launch that. So this kicks off. It's going to launch Goby launch a bunch of times, and essentially, you should see this come up. Seem to have an error here. Let's try this again. Looks like I'm still got some Goby3s running here from prior cases. So I don't know where these are from. So if you're after running a mission and you still see something in the screen, this doesn't happen very often, but if you forgot to Control C on one of the prior launch files or something went haywire, you can just kill them all by opening them up or Control Cing them, or you can just go kill off screen as long as nothing else is in screen. So let's try that again here. So I don't know really what happened in that case. So now this seems to be working the way we want. We expect the USV to sort of start off its mission, and what it's doing now is communicating to the AUVs. It's sending its subscriptions to them. We'll learn a good deal about this more tomorrow. And then as soon as all of them have subscribed and they can see the USV position, they go into the trail behavior where they follow the USV around its track. So I'll let that run here in the VM, and then outside the VM, so I'll minimize the VM here. So I'm still seeing the alpha mission. So what I have to do is go over to my profile manager, change the profile over to the trail profile, click submit, and then click bind to this machine. So it says I want to see the trail profile on this machine. And then it shows up so I can double click, like any of these vehicles, and it'll zoom me to where that vehicle is in the world, which is in this case for the trail mission off of Hawaii. And then again, you can reset the tilt and zoom by just clicking the R key. So reset your view. And there's a few other things you can do in Google Earth to make things a little bit more friendly. The options, you can change the various settings of quality settings. You can change the way the lat longs are set. You can also change the speed at which it zooms. I sometimes like to jump this up because it zooms quicker, and a variety of other settings that you may find useful. One thing that I sometimes like to do is shrink the font because I find it a little bit too big, and by making it smaller, I can see my vehicles better without getting them all covered up by the giant fonts. So if I expand this little tab over here, you can see all the vehicles that I might have. I'm only running 4 AUVs right now, so you see no data on vehicle for the rest of them. But they're in the profile. So if you end up running 10 vehicles, they'll show up here. And so this is what you expect to see, as I showed you in class, except with only 4 vehicles. If I look at the P Marine viewer mode, which is over here in the VM, you can see them. They're actually trailing an even spacing behind the USV, but then the comm cycle is staggered. So you get a message from 0, 1, 2, 3. And these times are the time since the last message of the vehicle. So you can see as it updates, this message is stale by the warp speed by times this. So this is like, if it was a real, this would be 20, 25, 20, 30 seconds late. So then it gets, so this is what you'd see if you were running this in a real situation where you had acoustic comms from the AUVs to the USV, except of course, we're not simulating lost packets right now, but these guys are really close anyways. So you get almost all your ACOMS messages through at that kind of range. So once you got this up and running and, things are looking pretty good and you're happy with this, I would say, you could try running this at a higher warp speed. So you can do Control C to bring down the mission. And then we can try running this faster. So if I just generate all that launch, 4 AUVs at 10 times warp, and then rerun it, this will pop up with, and now it's running at warp 10, which is twice as fast as before, which can be kind of nice if you want to have your autonomy tested faster and you're not willing to wait all day for your vehicles to move. So one thing in Google Earth that is a history is persistent. So you'll see the track from the previous mission and then it jumps to the start of the last mission. If this is annoying, you can shorten the length of the trail. So like if I set this to 60 in this left panel, it'll change all the vehicle tracks to the last 60 seconds instead of the last 180 seconds. And all of the stuff in Google Earth is the real clock. So that's the last real 60 seconds, or at warp 10, the last 600 seconds of simulated time. Other things I can do, like if I want to, I can uncheck show points and check show lines. So then all the vehicles show their little trail lines, so you can see the track of all the vehicles, which with 10 AUVs gets kind of cluttered, but with 4 AUVs is kind of nice. Actually, you can see the tracks, and that's, you can have a field day with this. Like you can change the colors of the vehicles and whatever you want. So that's pretty much, when you got this going and working, that's all I'm really hoping for out of day one. It's homework is really just to get this downloaded, installed, play around with visualizing and launching these missions. And then tomorrow we'll really dig into modifying these, making code changes and running it. So you want to be comfortable launching and having this run smoothly on your computer. So if you do run into any weirdnesses, we can try to help you with that, and just send a message on Slack or join me on the office hours, and I'll try to work through them. The last thing I should mention is if you are debugging issues running the all.launch, launch, in the temp directory, there are these files that are written. This is the output of screen for each of those launches. So 0 happens to be the top side. So these correspond to the order they are in this launch file. So 0 would be the top side launch, 1 would be the USV launch, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are AUV 0, 1, 2, 3 respectively. So if I were to sort of tail follow this file, I see this is the output of the Goby launch, top side of that launch. So this is a little bit meta at this point. This one's showing me that all of the Goby launches are running. If I look at this one, I see that all the processes within topside are running. So that's sort of another level down. And then other things you can do if you still seem to have trouble getting things to launch, I would suggest trying running this VM in VMware and see if that works better for you. or potentially playing with the video settings. As I've had trouble with on one instance, I think, of getting P-Marine Viewer to work right. I had to change some of the video settings within VirtualBox actually to turn 3D off. Paradoxically enough, worked. So, you know, I've tested this in Ubuntu 2004 host and a Windows 10 host, but I have no sure what it would work on a Mac or other Linuxes, but the hope is that it will. So again, if you have any questions, post them in Slack, join me in the office hours, and good luck.